While Final Fantasy has existed since the NES, I think there's a group of the fanbase that got their start with many of the PS1 entries. For me, it was with Final Fantasy VIII. My friend had a demo disc for it and we tried it together. The entire thing was foreign to us. We were used to action games and platformers. The focus on a story and a turn-based battle system with progression was all new to us. Final Fantasy VIII was my entry point into the series. I was intrigued by how video games could tell these long-form stories with rich worlds and characters. As I got older, I found out that there have been several games that tackled this stuff before Final Fantasy VIII, but when I was young, I didn't know of them. If Final Fantasy VIII was my entry point, then Final Fantasy VII was what cemented my love for the genre and the series. While Final Fantasy VII does have a blocky look to it with the early 3D models, there's a charm to these visuals that I appreciated even to this day. The battle system hooked me with the materia system that allowed for interesting combinations and personalization to each of the characters. The cast was solid, and Aerith stood out as a character who captured my attention right away. Like many, I was surprised by the PS3 tech demo that showed off the opening cutscene redone with PS3's tech. I was all on board for a remake for this game. When Square Enix said that the remake of Final Fantasy VII would take place over the course of a few games and that the first game would only take place during the Midgar portion, I felt like that was a nice chunk of the original story. In the original, Midgar provided the motivations for each of our heroes coming together to stop a larger threat. This seemed like a good stopping point for the remake as long as they could provide more depth to that location. After playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, I can say that this feels like a love letter to the original game, with the developers also providing their own spin on it. I had some issues with the story, but they nailed the characterization for our heroes. The new combat system is great. The presentation is mostly excellent, and I absolutely love this game. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Final Fantasy VII Remake. For the entire first chapter, I had nothing but a smile on my face. I love how the intro cutscene showed the different and familiar areas of Midgar. This is something that I wanted from the remake, showing me more of this place that I wasn't able to see in the original. This cutscene shows us a piece of the life above and below, then it transitions to a one-for-one remake of the original cutscene. I felt like I was experiencing Final Fantasy VII again for the first time. The visuals were right from the look of the characters to the details of the enemies, along with the excellent music. I really like how the combat system is a nice blend of the more action-oriented gameplay from Final Fantasy XV mixed with the ATB bar from the original 7. It feels like a nice blend of a more action-focused system with elements that are inspired by its past. So when you enter a battle, you have your basic attacks that you can pull off, along with an additional attack that is specific to that character. Cloud can swing at a wider range, and Barret can fire off more devastating explosives, and so on. You can also dodge roll and block attacks. You have an ATB bar that will fill up slowly, and different materia can increase that rate along with attacking enemies. Once you fill up your bars, you can then cast magical spells that use up MP along with performing different character abilities. While your main goal in these combat encounters is to defeat your present threat, you will want to take advantage of trying to find the enemy's weaknesses. As you attack enemies and hit them with their elemental weaknesses, you will build up a stagger bar. Once this is filled, the enemy will be staggered and you can do more damage. Staggering and attacking helps to build up your character's limit break and allows you to pull off harder hitting attacks or heal the entire party. And lastly, at certain points you can use a summon to gain a strong ally to help you out for a short period of time. There is a lot going on in the battles, but it never becomes overwhelming. The game will go into slow-mo when you are selecting a spell or item to use, and this can give you some time to reassess the fight. At any point in the battle, you can switch to different party members. You will naturally find yourself doing this to maximize your party's efficiency. The different characters handles a bit differently. Barret and Aerith are your ranged range fighters, Tifa is very fast, and Cloud can hit a wider area. On the surface level, the game may seem like a hack and slash type game, but it's more of a mix of the original Final Fantasy VII with a more modern action-focused system. Switching who you control in battle and staggering enemies helps to improve your battle efficiency and increases your chances for success.
I'm quietly announcing trouble!
Outside of the battles, there's a bunch of stuff to do as well. As you defeat enemies, you will earn experience points and level up your characters. Along with this, you can level up your weapons through the skill points that you earn. Here you can choose which upgrades that you want to focus on. These can provide you with different buffs, more health, MP, better attack power, and more. When you find a new weapon, there is an ability that is tied to that weapon. If you use that ability a few times in battle, then you can permanently learn it. Depending on the weapon that you have equipped, along with your other equipment, you can slot different pieces of materia to use. Some provide you with more health, MP, or you can use different spells and abilities. You can mix and match the different materia to fit how you want to play with these characters. In a few chapters in the game, you can complete side missions to gain extra rewards. For the most part, these stories are not the most interesting aspect of the game, but I liked on a few occasions that they used this time to be able to provide you with some more insight into something else into the world. For example, you get to see a quest that has a low-level Shinra soldier just doing their job, and another group of people that are seeing them as completely evil. But the entire mission just shows them as just doing their job. These missions are not required to finish the game, so if you don't want to do them, then skip them. Just like the original, the remake makes sure to include fun minigames like darts, box breaking, and even squats. Probably the best part about the minigames are the sequences where you get to ride the motorcycle and attack enemies. And the boss fights are really awesome. Most of the time, these encounters are tough and epic. One nice touch was how the boss fights will have a few different phases, and then they will have these short cutscenes that will break up the fight, and it kind of makes the whole thing feel more climactic. When it comes to the gameplay, I didn't really have any issues with it. One thing that I would love to see patched in, or in a sequel, is to be able to set behaviors for my AI teammates when I am not controlling them. While I was usually switching between characters a lot in fights, there were situations where my AI would just be doing nothing while I was attacking enemies. I wish you could set different commands for your AI, like if there's a ranged enemy, focus on them, or stick close to me, or be able to heal me if I'm low, or focus on a group of enemies, or focus on the main boss. I did not care for the boss fight during the motorcycle sequence, it was just a little bit too long. Lastly, there are a few spots in the game that look really bad, like a few objects that just don't have any detail on them, or some horrible looking backgrounds. They do take you out of the moment, but they don't ruin the experience. Other than that, I love the gameplay.
And kicking? Damn right. Leading man sticks around to the credit roll. Though we gotta keep moving if we want to make it that far.
When it comes to the story, I have mixed feelings on some of the new stuff that they added, but one thing that I was not expecting was for them to really nail the characters. As I played the first half of the game, and once I got to Aerith at the church, I was floored by how good of a job they did with bringing these characters into a modern age. They feel like the same characters I knew from the original with a new coat of paint and a good amount of voice acting. For example, they perfectly captured Aerith's adorable personality. She is flirty with Cloud, sweet, funny, and a bit feisty. I love how they provided more time and depth to the Avalanche team, especially through Jessie. These characters were more there for motivation for Barrett in the original, but in the remake they feel like actual characters. One whole chapter is dedicated to Jessie, and it was a nice, welcome addition. I also like the new character Leslie and how he provides some more closure on Don Corneo. The game's story was at its strongest when it focused on the main story of the original. Adding new elements that developed more characters or any of the character interactions were also the strong suits. There's so much charm here that it outweighs any of the issues that I had with some of the other stuff. Some of the other stuff I want to talk about will spoil many aspects of the story, so I'm going to have a spoiler warning here. If you do not want to be spoiled, then skip to this part of the video.
Minute? Cloud? Is that you? Oh my god, that makeup and that dress!
Nailed it. I know. Thank you. Moving on.
For the last several Final Fantasy entries, there's a level of Final Fantasy nonsense that is incorporated into those stories that make the entire story feel a bit overly convoluted at times. Final Fantasy VII was already pretty stuffed story-wise with all the ideas that it had. We had magic, aliens, the planet being alive, science experiments, and now on top of this with the remake, they're adding in destiny, fighting fate, and potentially multiple timelines. My main issue with the story is with the Whisperers. These beings are used to be arbiters of fate, and from what I understand, they are acting on behalf of the planet and making sure that everything in the remake follows the same path as the original 7. So in instances where the story might go in a different direction, they will correct it. For example, Cloud is about to kill Reno, but the Whisperers stop him. Barrett dies, but the Whisperers bring him back to life. I understand that they are trying to make sure that the timeline is maintained, but I wish that the use of them in the story was consistent. Do they prevent deaths, or do they bring people back to life after they have died? It seems like they can do anything whenever the story calls for it, which can hurt the stakes of the narrative since the rules are not properly conveyed to the player and it feels like they are just doing this stuff haphazardly. Also, the game doesn't really explain why the original timeline needs correcting from the Whisperers. I think it has something to do with Sephiroth, but if this was better conveyed to the player, then we would understand their motivation and the purpose for it. I would be fine with this game not fully explaining them and saving that for the next entry, but at the end of the game, you kill the Whisperers, causing the story to now go in a completely unknown direction. So I feel like this should have been the game that they developed this more and showed this to us. The Whisperers also feel like the writers are trying to create a roundabout way of telling the audience that they are going to go in a different direction than in the original story. But if the end goal was just to make an excuse for a different take on the story, then just make that different take than building in these Whisperers as an excuse. I had a few issues with the use of Sephiroth. I feel like the game should have showed some restraint in using him in this game. After 2 hours of playing, you encounter Sephiroth and Cloud is talking to him. Part of what made his character so interesting in the original was the excellent build-up. When you first play the game and you think that the president of Shinra is the main bad guy, but you find a sword stuck in him and most of the second disc is dedicated to Sephiroth's build-up, the remake doesn't really have that restraint or build up to it. Lastly, most of the stuff at the end of the game really leaves you wondering where they're going to take this story. While I have no idea if the writers even know what direction they're going in, I'm definitely on board for this ride, even if it results in a car crash. I can tolerate a large amount of Final Fantasy nonsense as long as they get the characters right, and here they nailed the cast and the game is so charming. I had some issues with the story, but the bad never outweighed the good, and I want to take another moment to praise the excellent music in this game. Here are a few tracks from the game. Overall, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a wonderful love letter to the original. This game feels like a labor of love. I feel like the developers wanted to respect the original while also using this as an opportunity to put their own spin on it. While a good amount of the new story elements I'm not a big fan of, there are great additions like fleshing out the Avalanche team members, and those are greatly appreciated. What really hooked me about the story is how the developers got the characters right. It feels like the PS1 characters with modern graphics and voice acting. I love seeing Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Red 13, and Aerith in this way. The game is full of charm, and just like the original, it isn't afraid to get a bit silly, especially with the cross-dressing part. These characters are now surrounded by excellent graphics along with revamped versions of the original soundtrack, and all of this works to create a very memorable experience. I absolutely love this game, and I'm excited to see where the next one takes us. I would highly recommend FF7 fans play this game, but if you're a first-timer, I would then recommend that you play the original and then play this one, as you will get more out of it. Thank you very much for watching.